Welcome to Inquiring Minds. I'm Steve Harper. With me, as always, is Donna Carlin. Donna, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing,
I,
Steve?
I'm doing great. I mean, I'm, uh, I'm here, right? So, I mean, anytime I can make the day and have this opportunity to have a conversation with you, that's a good day. So, I'm excited to be here. So, what are we talking about today?
Oh boy, this is going through my mind like in the middle of the night even. It's we talk with people in so many different arenas. Possibly me more than you a little bit because you're more tightly focused on your client base. Mine goes from cops to paramedics to corporate to family-owned businesses to innovators and the TED world and all that. And everything is a different focus depending on what they're dealing with, right? And so I was asking myself very early this morning before my first call, um, what am I listening for?
Ooh,
And I asked my client that, when she was creating a pitch for a program that she's doing that is extraordinarily impactful. What are you listening for in that conversation when you're making that pitch? In other words, what do you want to hear back? And what are you truly listening for? Are you listening for a little nugget that you could build upon or something that sparked interest in the other individual? So that sort of had a ripple effect, Mr. Ripple, to going to, okay, what am I listening for? What am I looking for? Because sometimes we go into a conversation specifically looking for an answer, specifically looking for direction, whatever it is. What am I looking for? Because I'm looking for A and I'm getting B and I'm not paying attention to B. What am I missing?
yeah.
So, again, how tight is my focus? What am I learning from all of this? And what am I going to do with it? Because when we go in with what we call an open mind, we never go in with an open mind. We have a preconceived idea of everything that we're going to do or experience or whatever else.
Whether
And
we
then
want it or
sometimes,
not. Yep, that's true.
exactly. So, what do we do with everything that we're learning, seeing, hearing that wasn't expected or was expected? So I'm going to throw that out, and then I could give some examples afterwards. But I want to know if you see where I'm going with this.
Oh, definitely. I think actually in any, I mean, you started with what am I, what am I hearing, right? And where am I,
What am I listening for?
what am I listening for when I come into that, which means what am I hearing when I'm having this conversation, which sort of tightens and strengthens that filter so that you are, laser focused on that. And I think that, pervades every other area in terms of how you respond, how you react, what am I learning, what am I sharing, what am I communicating on my end. All of those things are sort of informed by how everything comes in from the very beginning of that conversation. And so
Right.
totally get where you're going. I could see we could probably do episodes on each of those different verticals or offshoots of that one question, right? But I think really at the beginning, I think it's a really important question to be asking yourself prior to, because one, it's kind of like professional athletes. They don't just go out there and jump on the ice and start playing hockey, or go out on the court when the ref blows the whistle and start playing basketball or tennis or anything. There's a warm up process, and there is a got to get into the right mindset, and a lot of that is being mentally prepared, but as well as physically prepared for whatever the activity is that they're about to embark on. And I think ultimately, whether you're a coach, whether you're a business leader, whether you are just someone that has a true commitment to being truly authentic and truly present in every conversation, stopping yourself prior to it starting and asking yourself that question alone can be very impactful. It, like you said, it may not be completely possible for us to take away all the other distractions and all the craziness that goes on in my head. I mean, I've got multiple gerbils running around all the time, so that's my problem. But maybe just grabbing that one gerbil and
Yeah.
being able to say, okay, now stop, sit down, focus. Here's what needs to happen, and what am I hearing, so I know exactly how to respond and react. I think is really important. It's a great, a great place to have this conversation.
And, I want to be careful because what I'm hearing is not necessarily what I'm listening for.
That's right.
Okay. So they're very different. There's a saying, it's not what people hear, it's what they repeat. People hear things through their lenses, filters, everything else. So what
And
am I
how
listening
skewed that can
for?
be, right? Thinking about the game of telephone, you could have five people in
Yeah,
a room, say the secret to the one person to your right, and by the time it comes all the way around, it's completely different than what you actually started with.
that's it. And what am I hearing is after the fact.
That's
What am
right.
I listening for is the question you ask yourself when you go in before you even start the conversation and as the conversation's going. So in the present tense, what am I listening for? Am I listening for um, a spark? Am I listening for direction? Am I listening for um, something to alleviate my concerns? So, if I'm going into a doctor's appointment, I'm a cancer patient, you know that. So if I'm
Yep.
going in, because there's a concern from a test result, what am I listening for? I'm listening for somebody to tell me what the statistics are, what I need to watch for, what I need to stay healthy, all of that. I'm also listening for the unintended messages. So how my doctor said something might show me a concern that she's not necessarily coming straight out with. So, am I listening for the intangibles as well as the tangibles? And what am I looking for? I'm looking for answers, sure. I'm also looking for the multiple paths that I could take so I can make my own informed decision. I'm looking for truth. I'm looking for all kinds of things. I'm looking for how I could support the process so that we get the best possible
Yeah.
outcome, as well as it could be. So, looking at any interaction through those lenses, even if I went into a meeting, what am I listening for? I'm listening for how my client is positioning themselves, how they step into their leadership. I'm listening for confidence, fears, all of that. And what am I looking for? I'm looking for change, shifts. So again, these questions are tailorable to each one of you based on your world, your interactions, your relationships, all of that.
Well, I think it's a great proactive approach, right? Because now you're trying to pick up on the nuances that go into each conversation, like you said, with your doctor or with your client, and thinking about, just my own personal experience when my wife is mad at me and I go in and I ask, what did I do this time? Right. Most of the time it's very reactive because I'm just hearing what she said. I'm not listening for where did the frustration come from? Why is she upset in this moment? And what was it that caused this situation to evolve like it did? Being prepared before I open my mouth to, have that dialogue creates an environment where I can now ask a little bit more informed, follow up questions. I can have a more engaged conversation. I can truly understand where that person, or in her case, my wife's perspective is in that moment. May not be fully completely understandable to me because I may come in and still not understand what I did. But if I come at this with a different approach, as opposed to say what I do this time, and I'm just now hearing it, and it's like, yeah, that's like everything else that that I always do to make you upset. Then you really haven't really improved your situation in any way, shape, or form. Not only have you not learned anything, but you actually are showing to the other person that for me to take the time to explain it to you means that you don't really care anyway because you're just going to say yeah, whatever, right? And this gives somebody on the other side the perspective to say, look, this person is in front of me truly trying to understand and committed to understand what happened, what occurred, and what they can learn from it. And I think that's true in our personal dynamics. It's obviously true in a leadership role when we're talking to our direct reports or our colleagues, trying to figure out, the game plan before you walk in could be super critical and so impactful to those interactions.
Oh, definitely. You talk about personal experience with your wife. I could honestly say often when couples get into an argument about something, it's usually because something that was said is feels like a personal attack for whatever reason. And rather than listening that the other person feels hurt and listen for the hurt and
Yeah.
to discuss how this hurts the individual, you're looking for a rebuttal to be right
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to explain it away.
And
And when
defend.
you
Yeah.
explain
Defend
things
yourself
away,
against it. Yep.
that's right. When you explain it away and don't say, 1 minute, I just did something that Dawn is saying was incredibly hurtful.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, the hurt and how that could possibly not happen again. That's the learning curve. As opposed to, well, I could find a rationale why it was acceptable to do that in the moment.
Yeah.
What that tells the person who's saying this was hurtful is that I don't really care that you were hurt by it. I care to make it right because it made sense to me at the time. So it's very self-centered.
Well, at the
And
time and in the present during the conversation, because you're at that
exactly.
point defending yourself in that particular moment. And it is so critical. I mean, that's a personal dynamic, but you think about all the different scenarios that we go through as individuals throughout the day. Even if it is, I'm just thinking about a situation where maybe you're unhappy with a product or a service and you get a hold of a customer service person on the other end. It's you're not, you're trying to justify why you're angry and upset, and you're not really coming into that conversation prepared to hear exactly what they're going to do to solve it, or why it may have happened the way it did. And being prepared in that in that moment, you just have kind of the blur of what you're putting out there, and it never is going to end up in a really ideal situation, right? So if you've got somebody on the other end of the line that really does take ownership to the situation that occurred, your dissatisfaction, your frustration, whatever, and you come in and say, well, I really need to listen to how they're going to respond to this, how they're going to try and solve it, and in what my part in this is to come to the table to try and show, common courtesy and politeness,
Yeah.
and a sense of understanding that things don't always go the way we've talked about this in prior episodes. I mean, life has a funny way of getting in the way. Things don't always work out the way they're supposed to, but we're both here and now. So how do we derive a better outcome regardless, right? And part of that comes from your ability to be able to show up and take that necessary pause and say, okay, what am I listening for? What do I need to learn? What do I need to use to adapt this conversation in a way that can have a mutually satisfactory outcome?
And this sort of ties into one of our previous episodes where, the question was, how do you want that person to feel at the end of the conversation?
Yeah.
You want them to feel heard, acknowledged, respected, all of that, or demolished. I mean, let's face it here. Some people go into a conversation with the express focus goal in demolishing somebody
Sure.
for whatever reason. And that, I mean, that's going to come back to bite them ultimately. In this case, it's what am I listening for? And, I'll add your question afterwards. And then what am I hearing? Is it meshing with what I'm listening for? And if it's not, what is the question I need to ask in order to get what it is that I'm listening for?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
am I learning what I need to learn in order to make an informed decision? If the answer is no, again, what am I looking for? It's really interesting. When I used to, in my board meetings when I was running eco, I would have somebody else facilitate the meetings. Every 15 minutes we would stop, look at what the agenda item was, and the question was, are we getting what we need in order to make an informed decision? And if not, all the other fluff goes and we get
Yes.
back to this topic.
Yeah.
And we always achieved what we wanted to achieve in the time that we had allotted because we did that check. What are we looking for? What are we listening for? What are we going to learn? And what are we going to do with it? And that was behind every agenda item. And it was amazing because people started thinking in that manner. So we didn't have to do as many checks. How many meetings are there just to have another meeting down
Yeah.
the road? Because nothing came out of that meeting that sets direction.
Well, and just those, those four questions that you're asking when you start operating at that level as a leader or as a, colleague, or just in your life in general, right? Trying to make any
Yeah.
major decision, have a dialogue of any real meaning, and you start with those four and say, okay, this is our outcome. This is what we're trying to drive, towards. And I want you part of that journey in that conversation in
Yeah.
that moment, whether it's one on one or whether it's one, to several within a team meeting or a project, environment, etc. I think that could be super impactful. And I'd encourage our listeners to really write those down so that you can start to say, okay, how can I have that intention walking into each interaction? And when I start saying, hey, these are the rules by which I'm going to play with, and play within, you actually can help impact that behavior, how people show up, how authentic they are, and how invested they are in the process. I think, when I kind of utilize you as the example, Donna, but you got to come prepared, right? If I'm showing
Yeah.
up to your board meeting, I'm not looking at something 5 minutes before I walk in. I'm looking at it the night before. I'm forming my comments and my ideas, the points that need to be made that keep us on track, because I know that's the expectation that not only you have, but the other participants within the meeting also have. And so it puts everybody on their A game, which accomplishes a lot more in the end, right?
For sure. And, I invite our listeners to let us know if they've used these four questions and how it created a shift in their lives, in their workplace, in their
Yes.
interactions, and achieving, their intentions and what they set up to accomplish.
Yep.
Um, because I really think that some of these reflective questions is exactly what we need in a chaotic world that we live in right now.
Yes. Well, in a chaotic world, and bring some semblance of order back, at least, yeah, momentarily, if possible. I think we could all benefit. I mean, our politicians on both sides of the border could really benefit from these questions themselves. But that's a whole different episode.
Exactly.
Probably one that would be very controversial. So we may have to do that in the future. But for our listeners and for our audience that watches this on YouTube and Facebook, Donna, we'd love for people to contribute, their thoughts about this episode. Of course, as you just said, how often do you use these questions, and in what capacity have you seen it succeed, or what challenges have you experienced by putting them out there? Are people open to it? Are people, a little cautious? We would love to know and engage in a continuing dialogue and carry this episode forward. So, how might they do that, Donna?
So join our Facebook group, Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper.
Yeah.
Let us know, how you use this stuff, what your thoughts are, your comments, and what conversations you would like to see us tackle in one of our calls. Because none of this is scripted. Literally, as we log in, Steve says to me, "Okay, what are we talking about today?" Just like, when we start our call, and that's when we actually have this organic conversation. And we want to expand these organic conversations and include your 3 cents to it as well. So join our group. You could post on our YouTube channel and subscribe to that so you'll get notified, because we do these weekly. And we really look forward to hearing from you. We're getting personal emails
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
people, which is so cool.
Yep.
And if you have a really meaty subject, you just might get the opportunity to be on a brief call with Stephen and myself. So just wanted to throw that out as well.
Yeah, yeah, we love it. We appreciate the feedback we've been getting, the input, and we want to ask you guys to keep it coming. So let us know how we can continue to contribute and add value, and take these conversations and take them back to your boardrooms, take them back to your family meetings, your gatherings with friends, and put these topics on the table and see how people respond and react. You'll be amazed at the type of responses and reactions that you do get, and just how the depth of conversation that these topics can uncover and bring to the surface. So we encourage you to do that. We'll be back again very soon with another episode of Inquiring Minds. But until then, Donna, take care.
Have a good one.